You learned to walk. You learned to talk. You experienced your first snow, your first taste of something sweet, the first time someone you loved walked out of a room and you panicked because you didn't yet understand they were coming back. All of that happened. All of that shaped the person sitting here right now, and you remember almost none of it. That's the question we're actually answering today, why you can't remember being a baby, and the real answer is stranger than babies forget things. Because here's what almost nobody tells you. Your brain wasn't failing to hold on to those memories. There's a real chance it never stored them in the first place. Ask anyone what their earliest memory is, and you'll get something from around age 3 or 4. Maybe a birthday, maybe a fall, almost never anything from before that. This is not a personal failure. It happens to every human being who has ever lived, in every culture, on every continent. Researchers have a name for it, infantile amnesia. And here's the part that stops most people. It is not that the memories fade. It is that they were very likely never stored as memories at all. Think about what that means for a second. Your brain was not forgetting your first 2 or 3 years. It was operating in a mode where long-term memory, the kind you can deliberately walk back into later, simply was not switched on yet. So what was happening in there instead? A baby's brain is doing something almost unimaginable. It is building 86 billion neurons into a functioning network from close to nothing. It is wiring connections at a rate that will never be matched again at any later point in life. Researchers studying brain development have found that the hippocampus, the structure most responsible for forming long-term episodic memories, is one of the slowest parts of the brain to mature. It is still growing new neurons well into early childhood, in a process that essentially means the hardware needed to file away a permanent memory was still under construction. That is the part that reframes everything. You are not a small, broken version of an adult, failing to remember things correctly. You were an entirely different kind of learning machine, optimized for a completely different job. Adults form memories to recall specific events. Babies are doing something faster and more foundational. They are learning the rules underneath events. Gravity, faces, language, cause and effect. None of that requires remembering Tuesday. It requires absorbing a pattern so deeply that you never have to consciously think about it again. Here is where most people's understanding stops, and where it gets uncomfortable. Memory researchers have run studies showing something almost unsettling. Very young children can clearly remember things, sometimes for months. A toddler can recall where a toy was hidden weeks earlier. The memory exists. It is accessible. Then, somewhere between ages 4 and 7, something happens. Those early memories vanish, not gradually, but in a kind of mass deletion. Children who could describe a hospital visit from age 2 in vivid detail at age 3 could no longer access that memory at all by age 7, even with prompting. The information was there, then it was gone, not faded, erased. This is the detail that should sit with you longer than it usually does. Your brain did not lose your first memories through neglect. Something inside you actively cleared them out. And here's the part that gets stranger the longer you sit with it. Your brain didn't do this by accident. One leading explanation involves something called neurogenesis, the continuous production of new neurons in the hippocampus during early childhood. Every time a fresh batch of neurons gets integrated into that structure, the existing wiring shifts. Researchers studying this process in animal models have found that the very high rate of neuron production in infancy may physically destabilize old memory traces, essentially overwriting the circuitry that stored them before that storage was ever made permanent. The same biological mechanism that lets a young brain learn at an extraordinary pace may be the exact mechanism responsible for wiping out what came before. In other words, the thing that made you brilliant at absorbing the world as an infant is the same thing that guaranteed you would never remember absorbing it. There is also the language problem, and it is bigger than people assume. Memory, the kind adults experience, is heavily structured around narrative. You remember things as stories, with a beginning, a sequence, a sense of self moving through time. A 1-year-old does not have language sophisticated enough to build that structure. Without the scaffolding of words, an experience has nowhere to attach itself for later retrieval. The event happened. The brain processed it. But there was no narrative container built yet to hold it for the future. This is why your earliest memories almost always arrive right around the same age your vocabulary explodes. The capacity to remember in a retrievable, story-shaped way and the capacity for complex language develop on parallel timelines. They are not separate coincidences. They appear to be the same development. So here is what actually changes between then and now. It is not that your 2-year-old brain was inferior. It built itself at a speed and scale no adult brain will ever come close to again. It learned to recognize faces, predict physical objects, decode a language from raw noise, all without anyone explicitly teaching most of it. The price for that speed was a hippocampus too immature to file events away permanently, combined with a wave of new neurons that actively disrupted whatever early storage existed, combined with no language framework yet built to hold a memory in story form. 3 separate systems, each doing exactly what they were supposed to do, and together producing a near-total blackout on your first several years of life. And here is the detail that should genuinely bother you a little. The brain that did this to your earliest memories is the same brain you are using right now to read this sentence. It was not a flawed early version of you. It was you doing the most important developmental work you will ever do and trading the ability to remember it for the ability to never have to think about it again. You do not remember learning to recognize your mother's face. You do not remember the first time language clicked into place inside your head, turning noise into meaning. You do not remember the specific afternoon you learned that an object dropped from a height falls instead of floats. All of it is gone as conscious memory. None of it is gone as you. It became the architecture you think with, instead of something you think about. That is the actual trade, not forgetting as failure. Forgetting as the cost of becoming someone capable of remembering anything at all.